thing, of course, about what can and should be done there and what happened in how the central government was brought together. I think one of the basic faults of that procedures that took place in Berlin, if I'm not mistaken, after the fall of the Taliban government, was to keep a distance a little bit, if you don't mind, from the Pashtun composition of Afghan society. Although the chosen President Karzai himself was a Pashtun, and yet the representation in the government was not equivalent, if you like, to the composition of the Pashtun and the society. The other thing, in my view, that finally led to the fall of that government was that it always seemed to be a government made by the United States and the West, and hence was not legitimate in the eyes of the majority of Afghan people. And if you recall, the Taliban, having come from that composition, the Pashtuns of that society, yet over the years, in the last 20 years or so, they managed to recruit and bring Afghans from other ethnicities and tribal compositions, the Tajiks, the Hazaras, the Uzbeks, etc., in identifying themselves as opposing American Western imperialism. And the facts are that recently when the Taliban took over, for example, in Uzbek territory, they did so without a fight, meaning that those in that territory among the Uzbeks accepted to be taken over by the Taliban, as well as in other areas, the Tajik areas. And we've seen the collapse, for example, of the Ahmad Shah Massoud faction and the Panjshir Valley, who represented the Tajik composition of Afghan society. They collapsed very, very quickly when the Taliban took over the Panjshir. So it became a less Pashtun and more Afghan composition that was taking over from the Ghani government. So whether that is going to continue and the Taliban will be able to form a government that represents all of that composition, we still have to wait and see. Unfortunately, the interim government they have set up is totally made up of Pashtuns, as far as so we still have to wait and see.
On that same point, what is your view on the decision of the United States, both under President Trump and President Biden, to enter into bilateral negotiations with the Taliban and excluding the democratically elected Afghan government? They did that huge amount to humiliate them in the eyes of their own people.
Huge strategic mistake, in my view. You can't undermine your ally by talking to their enemy and leaving them outside the door. And that is, I think, why the government collapsed so quickly. Because it was clear, once Mr. Trump and then Mr. Biden did that, who could take Mr. Ghani's words as being genuine or true or implementable? So it was a huge mistake.
Thank you. Pakistan is now siding economically and militarily with China. Afghanistan protects the western flank of China-Pakistan economic corridor. Will this Pakistani-Chinese influence not diminish Saudi influence in Afghanistan? So it's about whether there's a trade-off in that respect.
Well, I don't think Saudi Arabia is in competition with any country. Wherever it can, particularly in Afghanistan, it has provided humanitarian help during the past 20 years through international organizations, particularly the United Nations, to make sure that hopefully that help goes in the right place and not be squandered either through corruption or other bad things that take place in Afghanistan. So the kingdom is the center of the Islamic world. As I mentioned, it is the birthplace of the Prophet. It is the locale of the holy mosques of Mecca and Medina. Muslims turn 5 times a day in prayer towards the kingdom. They come for the pilgrimage and the lesser pilgrimage in the millions and not just the thousands. So the kingdom has no issue about promoting itself as a competitor from that aspect, whether it is in Pakistan or Iran or Turkey or other countries that may want to increase their influence in the Muslim world.